Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this video is titled United States Air Force T-37 Instructor Pilot Tales, Scary Weather Recalls, and that'll put tread marks in your shorts. That's a quote from Captain B, and he saved my bacon more than once. And Captain B was a former Vietnam A-1E Sandy pilot, and he was just a super neat guy, down to earth, really had a lot of wisdom and knowledge, and and I learned a lot from him. And this is one of his quotes that deals with the second episode I'm going to talk about. Now, this is a picture of a what we called a paper trainer. This was set up so you could talk to your student about the various instruments and things in the T-37. Now, the blue arrow you see there, that's an attitude indicator that was added after I had been an instructor. When I was an instructor, we just had the altimeter, airspeed, and turn and bank on my side. The attitude indicator we flew off was on the student's side with a green arrow there, and sometimes we had an extremely crude one with virtually no markings on it called a J8. We also had a turn and bank indicator here. Um, we had never flown needle ball and airspeed in the Air Force. In fact, I didn't even fly it much later until I was getting my civilian instructor ratings on getting my instrument instructor. So at the time, of course, I'm a second lieutenant. I'm a young guy, and we flew cross cockpit, the attitude indicator, and instruments. It was kind of interesting because your head was turned, so you really had to fight vertigo. And this is one of the cases where you really just focus on the instruments. But that was a standard thing of being a T-37 instructor. You flew cross cockpit. Now here's a picture of the T-37 instrument panel from the instructor's viewpoint. And you see that you're looking everything at an angle, so there's parallax that you have to contend with to fly the airplane. And there's the attitude indicator with the blue arrow, and turn and slip there is with the red. And you notice that the altimeter actually kind of hides part of it. If we'd even practice flying with turn and slip, um, you know, it still wouldn't have been easy in a jet aircraft. Now we were out in the area, and a low deck of weather had moved in. The auxiliary airfield was fogged in. The main airfield advanced there had now had a 400-foot ceiling, and they instituted a weather recall. This had been just basically a VFR day that went bad. And I was out there with a very basic student. He had very little time in the aircraft, and our flight was in the cycle where we were just getting the guys new in the aircraft. And they were having a weather recall. Well, fine. I was a little farther out. My fuel at the time was fairly good, so they were pulling in the people closer in. Well, this kept going and going, and everything's fine. And it's getting down where there's just a couple of aircraft left to come in. And all of a sudden, I look over and the attitude indicator just rolls upside down. It had failed. Okay, this is not good. Well, the only way really to get it down would have been flying needle ball and airspeed. And I had no idea how to do that at the time, and I'm not even sure. We never practiced it if I could even do that. So I decided, well, I needed to join on somebody, and Captain B was in the area, and I called him up in the radio, and I said, "Hey, Captain B, I got a problem. I don't have an attitude indicator. Can I come in on your wing, and I'll just do a wing landing. You get me down through the weather, and then we'll do a section landing where we separate." And he goes, "Sure." Now, the interesting aspect of this was we had now, say, I'm a second lieutenant. I'm very inexperienced. We had actually a much more experienced um, instructor who had arranged for his own rejoin due to some sort of issue, and I forget what. But he had arranged for it, and the supervisor of flying. See, everything you do as an instructor, that you basically have to have it approved by the supervisor of flying if there's time. And if there's not time, you do it and hope for the best. But there's time. Everything's supposed to be coordinated. He'll give you advice. He'll approve what you want to do. Well, I knew that I was supposed to get his approval to do this, but I just didn't have time. I'm getting low on gas. We're going in. So I arranged to join on the wing. and we came back in to make the localizer only approach. We did not have ILS capability in this aircraft, and the GCA, the ground control approach radar system, it had to be manned, and it wasn't up at the time. So this was the only way to get the aircraft on the ground. So fine. Like I said, we had very low experienced students. So I'm on the wing. We're coming in, and we're descending down, and I'm now in the weather. And all of a sudden, I start rather drastically moving ahead on the lead aircraft. So I go idle, speed brakes, cross control, and I yell power. And I saw Captain B's head had been down. He had been getting the approach plate out. And of course, we hadn't got to anywhere near formation. So the student didn't know that you need to leave the wingman some power. And he saw that he was 5 knots fast and he pulled the power to idle. So that got interesting because if I had to break out at that point, we'd have probably had to punch out and that wouldn't have been good. So anyway, Captain B's head pops up, power comes back in. I fly down on the wing, we break out, separate, and land. Of course, I'm coming back into the supervisor of flying, and I think I'm going to get reamed. And the major, who was the supervisor of flying, was a guy you didn't cross. So I'm thinking, uh-oh. But I came in there, and he had nothing but praise. He said, you did exactly the right thing. You didn't have time to talk. You know, especially Captain B was a very experienced lead. And I came up on the wing and recovered the aircraft with no problem, and that was great. Now, I want to talk about another weather recall situation. Um, we had a thunderstorm move over the airfield, and it had just drenched the runway that we used for the T-37s, 5,000-foot long runway. And, you know, this wasn't an all-weather operation. We didn't fly in bad weather, and it's not like, major airports where they have grooved runways. Our runway wasn't grooved. And I'm coming back and I'm entering the pattern, and I am the first one to come back after the storm had passed. And the runway was flooded. Well, it wasn't this bad. And it wasn't quite this bad either. But it was totally covered in water. In fact, I could see where it really glistened. I mean, I was just looking at what looked like calm water on a lake. And this was one of my first experiences with hydroplaning. And there are three basic types. There are dynamic on a flooded runway where you come down and you actually lift off of the pavement and you have no braking whatsoever. And then you have viscous where you have a thin layer of moisture, and then you have reverted rubber. And I'm going to talk about my third situation where I got into reverted rubber. But anyway, okay, here's the runway advance, the one with all the arrows. That's the short one. And uh, it's 5,000 feet long. Of course, the touchdown point there is next to the blue arrow. And I touched down at normal airspeed of 90 knots. And Captain B actually is out in the mobile. He's doing the controlling. Each runway had a mobile controller, and they kind of operated, they controlled that runway with the students. So I touched down, and I pulled the power to idle, and I'm going down the runway, and I touched down at 90 knots, and I'm halfway down the runway there at the orange arrow, and I'm doing 85 knots. And I'm going, I'm in hydroplaning. The brakes do nothing, and I'm going, oh, this is not good. I'm not going to be able to stop. So I'm thinking, okay, I have to put the throttles forward. It's 18 seconds to come from idle to full power. I have a certain deceleration. I have the amount of runway remaining, and I'm calculating how much airspeed I'm going to lose in that distance, and then how much acceleration I'm going to get. And if I really did it right, I'd integrate over the acceleration curve to determine how fast the acceleration would come in and what point I would lift off the runway. Yeah, right. If you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you. No, I realized I wasn't going to be able to stop, and I slammed the throttles full forward and hope for the best. And the engines go ka-chung, 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 and they slowly come up. And of course, I'm still losing airspeed, and it's not looking great. In fact, one of the female crew chiefs, the crew chief for this aircraft, when I came back, she said she was going like that, hoping that I'd get airborne. And about where the red arrow is, I got about 85 knots, which was enough to get airborne. And I rotated virtually on the numbers and got airborne. And that's when Captain B says, well, I bet that put tread marks in your shorts. And I said, yeah, I think I'm going to go around the pattern here and wait till this dissipates. So that's what did. The runway finally drained, came back in, and had an uneventful landing. Now, my next hydroplaning situation occurred when I was in an A-37 unit. And we're coming back as a two ship, recovering as a two ship. I'm number two. I'm the wingman. And we had had the same sort of situation where we'd had a thunderstorm move over the airfield, and it had really flooded the runway. So we're coming back. I'm coming back on the wing. And again, it wasn't quite this bad. But I'm in the reverted rubber situation now. And the thing that was interesting here, this is where you get a layer of steam, and you can really damage the tire severely. But the interesting thing that happened, and the reason that this happened is we're coming in on the two ship, and we get separation in the final turn. Lead touches down about 1,000 feet down the runway in front of me, and he's on the left side, I'm on the right side. Well, we got 1,000 feet, great. But when he touches down, he just kicks up a water spray that comes back, hits my windshield, and I have absolutely no forward visibility. I can see out the side, and I'm trying to stay on my side of the runway, but if I'd have gone around, I could have very easily collided with lead. So I had to stop. So I can't see. I'm trying to stay on my side of the runway. I had no idea how far lead was down or if he was into normal braking, but I got heavy on the brakes. And it can damage the tires like this. In fact, they had to replace both tires on my aircraft, but I finally came to a stop. And as I came to the stop, the water cleared off the windshield, and I could see that he was also stopped about 1,000 feet in front of me on the runway, and both of our legs were shaking. So we cleared. We were happy for that event. Wasn't what we anticipated. Surprised us. He was just dealing with the hydroplaning issues and trying to stop and having difficulty doing that. I was dealing with the fact that I didn't know where lead was. I couldn't see him, and I might have hit him. So anyway, that got our attention. So those are three of my weather recall stories in the 37, both TNA. Thanks for watching.